I knew as a child that I would never be the favorite. Some children are fortunate enough to have parents who show them affection, treat them fairly, and acknowledge their accomplishments. I wasn't a child like that. My younger brother Roman's birth destined me to be the forgotten one in the family. Patrick and Marin, my parents, didn't hate me. No, hate takes work. All they did was ignore me. But Roman was their golden child, the center of their universe, the one who could do no wrong. It began when we were infants. My parents only needed that information to decide what to do. The partiality was blatantly apparent by the time I was old enough to comprehend. Every week, Roman received new toys, and I played with whatever hand-me-downs he didn't want. Roman's birthdays were lavish events with presents and visitors, but mine were afterthoughts. The way they spoke to him, how they regarded him, and how much they loved him were more important than the worldly possessions. They barely even glanced at me. Of course I tried. I made all the effort a child could to gain their affection. I hoped they would be pleased with my excellent marks. My small chest exploded with pride as I brought home a report card full of A's in the 3rd grade. "Look, Mom, every A." As I gave her the paper, I smiled and stated that. She gave it a fleeting glance. "That's lovely, honey," she whispered. She then looked at Roman, who had just displayed a rumpled illustration of an uneven dog. "Oh, my dear, this is lovely. Let's place it on the refrigerator." Roman's scrawled mess took center stage, and a stack of misplaced documents threw my flawless report card to the side. I realized then that even if I were flawless, it wouldn't be sufficient. Naturally, Roman was aware of his position within the family. He was the king, not just the favorite. He also ensured that I would never forget it. Knowing my parents wouldn't give a damn, he seized my belongings. If I attempted to express my displeasure, he would become enraged, making me the antagonist. He controlled what we watched on TV, where we went on family vacations, and what we had for supper. It never mattered what I thought. In someone else's ideal existence, I was the supporting cast member, the filler, and the extra. But even as a young child, I was aware that I wouldn't remain in the background indefinitely. I would leave. I would succeed in my endeavors. I would demonstrate to everyone that they should never forget me. When I got to high school, my only objective was to get away. I didn't want to spend my entire life under the shadow of my parents, sacrificing myself for Roman's success. I had to create my own future if I wanted one. I worked as a result. Hard. Understanding that achieving high grades would secure my future, I dedicated myself entirely to my studies. I stayed up late studying, applying for scholarships, and making plans for the future, while Roman went out partying and wasting our parents' money as if it were his birthright. Then, at last, my opportunity arrived. One of the nation's most prestigious universities accepted me, potentially opening up opportunities beyond my wildest dreams. Better yet, I received a scholarship that paid for the majority of my education. It was the culmination of all my efforts. Naturally, though, my folks had different ideas. I anticipated a response when I broke the news to them. Perhaps pride, perhaps even the slightest recognition that I had done something amazing. My father, on the other hand, hardly raised his head from his newspaper. "That's fantastic," he whispered. In contrast, my mother scowled. "However, why would you wish to travel so far? Like Roman, you ought to attend the nearby institution. For us, it would be simpler. Easier for you." Confused, I repeated. She continued. "We don't want Roman to feel bad. It wouldn't be fair if he had to settle for the local school, while you attended a prestigious one." As I looked at her, I waited for her to clarify that she was kidding. She wasn't. Was Roman, who had never worked for anything in his life, and had barely made ends meet in school, suddenly the reason I couldn't pursue my goals? I shook my head and remarked, "That's absurd. Roman could have put in a lot of effort as well. He has the same opportunity as me to apply for scholarships." A small line formed between my mother's lips. "You're not getting it. All we want to do is maintain equilibrium." Equilibrium? Did she mean it? There has never been equilibrium in our family. I was so furious that night that I lay awake and stared at the ceiling. Because they didn't want to annoy Roman, they were actually going to hold me back. I then came up with a plan that would allow me to enjoy my future, without severing all connections just yet. I smiled and said, "You're right," to my folks the following morning. I should remain near home. However, if possible, I would prefer to live in the dorms. I require some autonomy. Thinking they had won, they consented at once. They were unaware, however, that I had already agreed to attend the esteemed university. I went for a new life, one they were unaware of. After packing my bags and telling them I was going to live in the dorms, I was free for the first time in my life. And it was amazing. I held my breath for the first few months, hoping my parents would notice. However, they never did. They thought I lived in the dorms at the nearby college, a short drive away. They never paid a visit or made a lot of inquiries. They were too preoccupied with lavishing their affection on Roman, who, surprisingly, wasn't succeeding in college, as they had anticipated. I was creating the life I had always desired in the meantime. The scholarship covered the majority of my tuition, with part-time work providing the remaining funds. At last, I found myself surrounded by individuals who viewed me as an equal, not as a lesser sibling or an afterthought. For the first time, I was just Jonas and not Roman's brother. And I prospered. I excelled in my classes, developed close bonds with my teachers, and in my second year, I even got an internship. Thanks to my diligence, I was able to receive a six-figure employment offer by the time I graduated, 2 years ahead of schedule. I had completed the task. Without the support or consent of my family, I had created a future for myself. What's the best part? They were still in the dark. In the belief that he was paying my tuition, my father kept sending money. I had the power to stop him. I could have been honest with him. But I believed he owed me this much after years of disregard, and a sense that I was unimportant. The money wasn't the only factor. It was about reclaiming something that had been neglected for a lifetime. However, I was aware that the secret would soon be revealed. And I knew my time was up, when my father called one morning with a demand, rather than a plea. My phone buzzed in the early hours of the morning, signaling that my father was calling. I was hesitant to respond. Over the previous few years, we had hardly communicated, and when we did, it was usually brief and cursory. However, there was something about the way his name appeared on my screen that made me uneasy. I replied. He said, "Jonas," with the authoritative tone he always used when he wanted me to follow orders. "Roman is getting married. You must attend the wedding, which is in 3 weeks." Unsure if I had heard him correctly, I remained silent for a while. He went on. "To assist with the preparations, we need you to return home a few days early. We anticipate having the whole family there, because it's a significant occasion." The ridiculousness of that nearly made me chuckle. Did the entire family participate? I hadn't really been a part of that since when. My mind was racing with ideas. While my parents treated me like a nobody unless it was convenient, I lived alone and worked. And they were beckoning me back like a lost pet now. Without warning, a glimmer of hope flickered inside me for a moment. Perhaps this was an attempt to make amends, a gesture of reconciliation. Perhaps they finally noticed that I was more than just Roman's shadow. However, any notion of it was shattered by my father's subsequent remarks. "You do not wish to let your brother down, do you? We don't want anyone to inquire about the whereabouts of his older brother on this momentous day. It wouldn't appear nice. It was there. It has nothing to do with me. I was never the focus. They weren't inviting me to come because they wanted to catch up, or because they missed me. Simply put, they didn't want rumors about the groom's brother's absence to spread." I tightened my grasp on the phone and gritted my jaw. I had swallowed my pride for years. I had accepted my status as the forgotten son, and allowed them to push me away and control my life. Now, though, I had an option now. Furthermore, I refused to allow them to continue to dominate me. I inhaled deeply before giving my father the unexpected response. "I will not be attending." It was so quiet on the other end of the telephone. Then his voice fell, icy and piercing. "What just did you say?" "No, Dad," I answered in a steady, quiet voice. Powerful. "I'm not there for any reason." He became enraged at once. "You useless brat. Have you taken into account everything we have done for you? What do you think this will look like?" Once more, it was evident that he wasn't worried about me. "It has to do with appearances," I firmly said. "I don't care how it looks. I will not be attending." I sensed a change as soon as I finished speaking. Suddenly, a burden I was unaware I was carrying was removed. I had said no for the first time in my life. And I wasn't going to back down. I thought my dad would be upset. I anticipated shouting and even a barrage of taunts about me being an ungrateful son. His warning, however, caught me off guard. "Jonas, you can forget about your tuition if you don't attend this wedding," he stated in an irate tone. "I am interrupting you." It nearly made me chuckle. He continued to believe he was in charge of me. I had allowed them to disregard me for years. I had allowed them to ignore me and push me away. Now though, I had finished their game. I inhaled deeply, allowing the silence to grow before I spoke. "All right," I answered bluntly. "Stop me. Do as you please." There was a pause in the line. My father then sneered. "You're playing a bluff. To complete your education, you need that money." I made the decision to reveal the truth at that point. I graduated already. Quiet. His mind was attempting to digest what I had just said, and I could practically hear the gears spinning. "Are you a graduate?" Finally, a softer, almost incredulous voice emerged. That's correct, I added. I completed it a year ago. I completed it on a full scholarship. I'm not in need of your cash. I didn't. His disbelief was palpable over the phone. I was in control for the first time in my life. With an unwavering voice, I said, and one more thing. I now earn more money than you do. Boom. His breathing accelerated, and I could hear his frustration growing. He had been treating me like I was nothing in comparison to Roman for years. Now, though, he had been overtaken by the boy he had disregarded, denigrated, and forgotten. You, he began, but for once he was at a loss for words. I didn't hold off till he discovered them. I've had enough, Dad. I'm not going to Roman's wedding. And I refuse to be coerced into doing what you want by you, Mom, or anybody else. Then I hung up the phone before he could speak another word. In an instant, I was no longer under their authority. Anticipating a storm, I hung up. And I was correct. My phone was overflowing with text in 1 hour. The guilt tripping came first. Mom, how could you harm your family like that? Jonas. Roman has always held you in high regard. On his wedding day, do you truly want to destroy his heart? Dad, I provided you with a home, food, and upbringing. And you pay us back like this? Jonas, you've changed. And not in a positive way. The phony pity followed. Mom, let's discuss this, please, my love. We can figure something out. You don't need to be that obstinate. And lastly, the fury. Dad, you're an unappreciative brat. My time should never have been wasted on you. You're not good enough. I shook my head as I read through the messages. They were merely supporting what I had said. They showed no concern for me. They were concerned with appearances. They wanted to make sure that no one would question why their other son wasn't at the wedding. I choose to disregard them. I finally received the message I had been anticipating 2 days later. Dad, all right. Do you wish to pretend that you are independent of us? Then don't ever expect anything from us again. Think of oneself as disconnected. I grinned, at last. I only used 3 words in my response. Sounds good. Bye. I then blocked them. Each one of them is single. Unmarried. 1. My folks. My sibling. Every family member who made an attempt to place the blame on me was present. For the first time in my life, I felt liberated after cutting them out. I didn't regret anything. Because I was fully aware of what was going to happen next. And I was prepared to see it all come to pass. The disintegration of everything happened quickly. My aunt, my mother's sister, unexpectedly called me a few days after I had banned my relatives. Initially, I contemplated whether or not to respond. However, my curiosity overcame me. She said in a quiet, almost excited voice, Jonas, have you heard? Heard what? She let out a loud sigh. Roman's wedding was a complete disaster. I almost dropped my phone. What do you mean? She inhaled deeply. His fiancée? Turns out she was a scam artist. My mouth fell to the ground. She apparently persuaded Roman and my parents to invest in some exclusive once-in-a-lifetime opportunity before the wedding. This is an irresistible offer. A return that is assured. She performed them flawlessly. And she disappeared as soon as she had the money. The event was not a wedding. There was no financial outlay involved. Nothing. My parents had poured all of their money into that fraud. My aunt went on. They lost everything. The savings, the wedding money, even their house is at risk. They had to take out loans to cover the debt. But now the business is struggling. And they can't keep up with the payments. I ought to have felt guilty. Instead, though, I chuckled. Because they were going through exactly what they put me through for the first time in their life. For years, they had adored Roman, centered their entire universe around him, gave everything to him. And they had just lost everything because of him. The best thing though? They held him responsible. My parents, who had treated Roman like royalty throughout my entire life, betrayed him. And now? They desired my return. That's why Mom called you, my aunt clarified. Not because she misses you. Because they need you. They were poor, no safety net. And they wanted to suck me now that Roman had let them down. I breathed out slowly. Let me guess. They're expecting me to swoop in and save them? My aunt laughed. Bingo. I rolled my eyes. Yeah, that's not happening. Because I was free for the first time in my life. Furthermore, I had no intention of allowing them to drag me back into their mess. This is not the right moment. Never. I believed that simply banning their numbers would suffice. So they would understand and proceed. I was mistaken. My nightmarish family arrived at my door a few days after my mother's frantic phone call. How they obtained my address is still a mystery to me. Perhaps they pleaded with one of my former acquaintances for it. Perhaps they employed a person to find me. In any case, I wasn't pleased to see them. My mother's cheeks were already crimson with tears when I opened the door. Please, Jonas, she cried. We need your assistance. Behind her, My father stood, looking desperate and worn out. Roman was present as well. Roman, the golden child, the pampered brat who had ruined my life for years, was now looking at me as if I were his only hope. I folded my arms. What do you want? My mother took hold of my hands and held onto them tightly. Everything was lost. She said, we don't even have enough to pay the rent, let alone our savings or the house. Unfazed, I gazed at her. That sounds terrible, but how does that relate to me? My dad cleared his throat. You're successful now, Jonas. You have a stable job. You're doing well. As our son, you should help us. I gave a chilly laugh. Oh, now I'm your son? They recoiled at that. Oh, funny, I added. You never cared about me when I was struggling. But now that you need something, suddenly family is important? My dad's face became stern. You're not understanding, I interrupted him. No, I completely get it. You're looking for money. I stared at Roman, who appeared much more pitiful than normal. I said, and what about you? Why are you here? Roman took a deep breath. I miss having my big brother around. I almost burst out laughing at him. I shot back. Oh, now you care about me. What happened to all those years of bullying? What happened to treating me like I was nothing? His face flushed. Jonas, please. Mom and Dad are going to cut me off. I have nowhere else to go. I looked at him for a while. Subsequently, I pivoted, entered my home, and forcefully shut the door in their faces. I could hear Roman murmuring. I knew this was a mistake. My father swearing under his breath. And my mother crying through the door. I didn't care, though. I had completed my task. I'm no longer willing to be the neglected son, completed as a contingency plan. I've had enough of letting them control me. I was free for the first time in my life. The last farewell, I did something the following morning that I ought to have done long ago. I went into my banking applications and stopped all of the automatic payments I had configured. They will no longer have any money for utilities. No more hiding their groceries. No more paying for Roman's expenses. They were alone. I then blocked them once more. Mom. My dad. Roman too. Each and every last digit. This also applies to each and every email. For good this time. I felt like I could breathe for the first time in years. And what do you know? I felt no remorse. Not at all. Because blood isn't what defines a family. It's all about your supporters. Those who are concerned. They are the ones who stand by you no matter what. And they were never like that. I then went on. I concentrated on my work, my future, my joy. And I didn't turn around.